The shocking discovery: the galaxy had always been a place where order and power were well understood. Each species had its place. The most powerful held sway over the others, while the weaker ones stayed in the shadows, surviving by the grace of the stronger races. But something unexpected had just occurred at Discovery, so shocking that it rattled even the most confident minds in the galaxy. It all started on the Andorian homeworld, a planet renowned for its advanced technology and formidable military. The Andorians had always been at the top of the galactic food chain. They had conquered worlds, created colonies, and dominated trade routes. Yet, they found themselves uneasy when a strange transmission came in from a distant planet, one they had never heard of. Earth. At first, the transmission seemed innocent enough. A human appeared on the screen, sitting in front of a simple backdrop that looked like nothing more than a small room. His expression was calm, almost indifferent, yet there was something unnerving in his eyes. He spoke slowly, as if choosing his words with great care. "We are not like anything you've encountered before," the human said. The message was short, but its impact was immediate. As the Andorians scrambled to decode the rest of the message, the transmission suddenly cut off, leaving a chilling silence in its wake. This cannot be," the lead scientist, Arvik, muttered as he stared at the screen. His mind raced, trying to make sense of the cryptic words. Andorians were known for their ability to understand and decrypt any language or communication, but this was different. The human had spoken with a calmness that unsettled them. What did he mean by "not like anything" they had encountered? The Andorians knew fear, but they had never felt it on this scale. The galaxy's powerhouses, races like the Tylarax, the Jorlin, and the Arcturians, had never worried about any species beyond their own. But this human, this simple being from a distant planet, was forcing them to question everything they knew. The message from Earth was sent across multiple frequencies, reaching not only the Andorians, but also various other species that called the galaxy home. News of the transmission quickly spread, and soon a gathering of the galaxy's most powerful races was underway. They convened in a massive hall on the Jorlin homeworld, a neutral ground where all races could meet to discuss matters of galactic importance. The room was filled with whispers, each species murmuring their thoughts on the unexpected transmission. Some were skeptical, dismissing it as an isolated incident. Others, however, were not so sure. The Tylarax, a species known for their ruthlessness and combat prowess, were the first to voice their concerns. What if this is more than just a message? General Tharok of the Tylarax said, his deep voice echoing in the hall. What if this human, this Earth you speak of, is a hidden threat? They may be far from us, but they have managed to send a message across the stars. The Andorians, always proud and confident in their dominance, did not like to show weakness, but even they could not deny the unease that had settled over them. Arvik stood at the center of the hall, his blue-skinned hands clenched tightly in front of him. The transmission was too brief, he said, his voice low. We need more information. We must investigate this Earth and the human who sent the message. A murmur of agreement passed through the crowd, but a small, quiet voice from the back of the room interrupted. Isn't it strange that a species we know nothing about could send such a message? It was the voice of Corin, an ancient Arcturian scholar whose knowledge of the galaxy was unmatched. They've had no contact with any of us, yet they speak as if they are aware of our very existence. This is not normal. A silence fell over the room as the implications of Corin's words sank in. Could it be possible that humans, a species so far away, had been watching them? Or was there something more to this message? What could this human mean by saying they were not like anything the galaxy had encountered? The fear was palpable now. The idea that a species, one that had never been a part of the galactic order, could make such a statement without even flinching, was a blow to the arrogance of the galaxy's most powerful races. They had always considered themselves invincible. masters of the universe. Yet here was a human, an unknown species, who spoke as though they were the ones who held the power. The council members, each representing a different race, began to discuss what should be done next. The Arcturians, known for their wisdom, advised caution. "We cannot rush to judgment. We must investigate carefully," they said. But even they could not ignore the nagging feeling that this human's words were a warning, not just a message. Hours passed as plans were made. A special envoy was to be sent to Earth, tasked with learning more about this mysterious human and the planet they called home. But deep down, everyone knew that this discovery was no ordinary one. A human had dared to send a message across the stars, and it was one that the galaxy would never forget. As the meeting adjourned and the leaders left the hall, the weight of the discovery lingered in the air. The galaxy's greatest powers that had dominated for centuries, were suddenly faced with a question they could not answer. What if humans were not the weak, primitive species they had believed them to be? What if they were far more dangerous than anyone had ever imagined? The galaxy would soon find out. This part sets the stage for the growing tension and fear of humanity's potential, establishing the hook and building suspense for what's to come. Let me know if you need any changes. A history of humanity. The galaxies had always been divided into clear sections, with each species ruling its corner of space. But as the message from Earth spread through the stars, it quickly became clear that something was wrong. The fear that humans had stirred up was not just about a single human being or a planet far away. It was about a species whose history was unknown to every powerful race in the galaxy. A species that had quietly existed in the shadows, undetected, and now it seemed they were ready to reveal themselves. The Arcturians, a race known for their vast libraries and deep knowledge, immediately began to search through their records, looking for anything that could explain the unexpected message. What they found sent a chill through their bones. There were no records of humans in the official histories, but there were whispers, scattered mentions, fragments of encounters that hinted at something much more dangerous than anyone had realized. It was in the archives of the ancient Zoraids, a now defunct species that had once been the galaxy's most influential, that the Arcturians found a series of cryptic texts. These ancient texts spoke of humans as a race that had been quietly influencing the galaxy's events for centuries, shaping the destinies of entire civilizations from the shadows. The Arcturians had always thought the Zoraids were a race of myth, their records unreliable and incomplete. But now, with the human message fresh in their minds, they began to wonder, had the Zoraids known something they had missed? Had the humans been involved in galactic events without anyone noticing? The most unsettling part of the Zoraid records wasn't the mentions of humans in passing, it was the sudden disappearance of every trace of their civilization from galactic history. The Zoraids had once been close to a world-shaking discovery, one that had promised to change everything. Yet when they looked back, all references to humans, any evidence that they had existed, had simply vanished. Arvik, the Andorian scientist who had first received the mysterious transmission, couldn't stop himself from feeling a sense of dread. He had studied the human transmission countless times. There was something in the tone of that brief message, something about the calm, confident delivery of those words, "We are not like anything you've encountered before," that didn't sit right with him. What if the human message wasn't a warning? What if it was an invitation? The Andorians' long-standing arrogance and belief in their own superiority had always kept them secure in their place at the top of the galactic ladder. But now, they found themselves doubting everything. They had always believed that they were the most advanced, the most powerful, but this human, this simple creature from a distant world, had somehow managed to awaken a fear in them that they couldn't explain. What if humanity's rise was not some isolated accident? What if it was part of a larger plan, one that the galaxy had been blind to for far too long? A meeting was called, this time not just with the Andorians and Arcturians, but with representatives from all across the galaxy. The Tylarax, the fierce warlike species that ruled entire sectors, were there. So were the Jorlin, the engineers who built the most advanced technology in the galaxy. Even the once reclusive Shalovians, known for their telepathic powers, sent an envoy. Each of them came to the table with the same question: what do we know about humans? And the answer was nothing. The room was filled with murmurs as each race tried to recall any interaction they had ever had with humans. It turned out there had been very few. The humans were always just there, quietly existing on their little blue planet, never seeking attention, never making a big impact. Until now. And now the entire galaxy was wondering how they had missed it. Can we even be sure this human was the first? Corin, the Arcturian scholar, asked, could there be more? Are we the ones who are late to this discovery? The room went silent. The thought that humans had been quietly preparing, growing in power and learning in ways no one had imagined, was unsettling. The idea that humanity had hidden in plain sight for so long was terrifying. Had the galaxy's leaders been so focused on their own power that they had overlooked the rise of a species that could one day challenge them all? We must learn about them, General Theric of the Tylarax growled, his red eyes burning with concern. If we don't, we may find ourselves facing a threat we cannot defeat. But how would they learn about humanity? What was it that made humans so dangerous? The question hung in the air, unanswered, as the galaxy's most powerful minds struggled to come up with an explanation for what was unfolding. Every race knew they had been too focused on their own advancement, their own power, to see the quiet strength of the humans. And now, they were paying the price for their ignorance. The humans were no longer just a curious anomaly. They were a force that could not be ignored. And the galaxy, for the first time in its history, was beginning to realize that it had been wrong about them all along. The question wasn't whether humans could survive in the galaxy, it was whether the galaxy could survive the humans. This part builds on the growing realization that humans are far more than they seem, using simple language and a continuous flow to keep the suspense rising. Let me know if you need further adjustments. The unseen power of humans, the galaxies. Most formidable races had always prided themselves on their strength, their technology, and their unshakable belief that nothing could stand in their way. But now everything they thought they knew about the universe was being questioned by a single message from a human. The simple words spoken by that human were still echoing in their minds. We are not like anything you've encountered before. Those words had struck a nerve that none of the galaxy's powers had anticipated. And as the days passed, the fear they felt only grew stronger. The question was no longer who humans were, but what they could become on the planet. Zyran, a world known for its brutal warriors and advanced weaponry, the Tylarax Empire prepared to launch an attack on the human colony on Earth. The Tylarax had seen countless species fall before them, with little effort. They were fierce and relentless, their weapons were unmatched, and their strength was legendary. But there was something different about this target. Earth was no ordinary world, and the humans were not like any species the Tylarax had encountered. General Theric stood before the massive war table, his crimson eyes narrowed as he observed the strategic display. His mind worked through the tactics they would use to obliterate the humans and take control of their planet. It would be an easy victory, or so he thought, as the Tylarax fleet arrived in Earth's orbit. Their first shock came when their long-range scans revealed something they hadn't anticipated. Humans weren't alone on Earth. Strange signals emanated from deep beneath the planet's surface. The readings were unlike anything they had ever encountered. They've been hiding something, General Theric muttered to his officers. The Tylarax had invaded many planets before, but the humans had managed to keep their secrets hidden deep within the bowels of their world. As the fleet prepared to deploy troops for a ground assault, a secondary shock hit the Tylarax fleet. The human fleet, a small collection of ships compared to the Tylarax armada, unexpectedly appeared from behind. Earth's moon like a storm that had been waiting to break free. The human ships were unlike any the Tylorax had encountered. They were not sleek and elegant like the ships of other advanced species. They were bulky and crude in comparison, but they had one thing no other fleet in the galaxy possessed: determination. General Tharok watched in disbelief as the human ships engaged their fleet. The battle was unlike any the Tylorax had experienced before. The humans fought with a fierce desperation that no alien species had ever shown. They adapted quickly to every tactic the Tylorax used, countering each move with precision that defied explanation. Battle raged for hours. The Tylorax fleet had the advantage in sheer firepower, but it became clear that the humans were not going to be easily defeated. Every strike they made seemed to have a purpose. Every maneuver they executed felt calculated and deadly. The Tylorax were used to overwhelming their enemies, but the humans fought back not with technology or superior weaponry, but with something far more dangerous: their will to survive. After what felt like an eternity, the Tylorax fleet began to retreat. The humans had done the impossible. They had forced a race known for their might to run for their lives. General Tharok could hardly believe what had just happened. He had never seen such resolve in a species before. It was as if the humans were playing a different game altogether, and their strength wasn't just in their firepower, it was in their hearts. Back on Zarin, the Tylorax leadership was in chaos. The warriors who had once been feared across the galaxy were now in retreat, and no one could understand why they had never faced an enemy like this before. Their weapons had failed them. Their strategies had been ineffective against the humans. They had been blind to a power that no one had even suspected existed. The news of the Tylorax retreat spread like wildfire across the galaxy. Every species from the Arcturians to the Jorlin were stunned by what they had heard. The humans had done the unthinkable. They had defeated a species that had never been defeated before. And it wasn't through superior weapons or technology. It was through their strength of will, their ability to adapt, and their unyielding determination to survive. The galaxy's most powerful races were now forced to confront the uncomfortable truth. Humans were not weak. They were not a primitive species to be ignored. They were a species that could not be predicted. They could not be controlled, and they could not be stopped. As more intelligence came in from different corners of the galaxy, it became clear that humans had been growing in power for far longer than anyone had realized. Their ability to learn from every encounter, their adaptability in the face of impossible odds, their raw courage in the face of certain death made them a force that could not be underestimated. The fear of humans was no longer confined to a single species. It had spread like a virus across the galaxy, infecting every race that thought they were untouchable. The galaxy had thought it understood power, but the humans had shown them something they had never seen before, something that terrified them more than any weapon or fleet ever could. The humans had a strength that no alien species could match. Their resolve was unbreakable, and the galaxy would soon learn that the most dangerous thing about humans wasn't their weapons, it was their will. This part dives deeper into the idea that humanity's true power lies not just in their technology or numbers, but in their will to survive and adapt in any situation. The suspense and growing fear of humanity's strength are woven throughout, keeping the tension high. Let me know if you'd like to refine any part. Humans and their dark secrets. The galaxy's most powerful species had spent centuries conquering, expanding, and claiming dominion over the stars. Their histories were filled with victories. Their weapons were unmatched, and their strategies were finely honed through countless wars and skirmishes. But in the wake of their defeat by the humans, something had changed. The galaxy was no longer as certain as it had once been. The question that now haunted the minds of every leader, every strategist, and every ruler in the galaxy was simple yet terrifying. What are humans hiding? It wasn't just the battle with the Tylorax that had shaken the galaxy. It was the unsettling feeling that humanity had something far beyond anyone's comprehension. The Tylorax had fought them, the Jorlin had studied them, and the Arcturians had watched them for centuries. Yet, All had failed to see what lay beneath the surface. Humans were not just survivors, they were something more. And it was becoming clear that the galaxy's most powerful races were blind to the full extent of human potential. The Arcturians, the most ancient and wise of the galaxy's races, had long prided themselves on their knowledge and their ability to unravel the mysteries of the universe. They had cataloged thousands of species, tracked the rise and fall of empires, and studied the history of every planet they could reach. But when they turned their attention to Earth, they found that their records were disturbingly sparse. It was as if the humans had never existed in any meaningful way on their radar. To the Arcturians, this was a puzzle one that needed to be solved. They had sent out their best scholars, their most seasoned intelligence officers to Earth to uncover the truth. What they found, however, was more than they had bargained for. The humans had kept their history hidden, concealed from the eyes of those who might have discovered them too soon. They had hidden their strength, their ingenuity, and their capacity for violence behind the facade of a seemingly primitive world. As the Arcturians dug deeper into their investigation, they uncovered a disturbing pattern. Every time humanity had faced a challenge, whether it was a war, an invasion, or a natural disaster, they adapted. Humans had this innate ability to take any situation, no matter how dire, and turn it to their advantage. They had faced extinction before, only to rise from the ashes stronger and more determined than ever. But it wasn't just their adaptability that was so frightening. The deeper the Arcturians went into humanity's history, the more they realized that humans were capable of far darker things than anyone had imagined. They found records of human weapons, tools of destruction that were not only devastating in power but were designed with a single purpose in mind: survival. Every weapon, every piece of technology had been created not to conquer, but to ensure that humanity could defend itself against anything, even the most terrifying threats. And some of these weapons were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Arcturians discovered documents long forgotten and buried in Earth's deep archives that spoke of humanity's darkest hour, the rise of the human dominion. During this period, Earth had faced threats from alien species far more advanced than they were. These invaders had come to Earth with one goal: to enslave humanity, to strip away their freedom and their culture. What the invaders hadn't anticipated, however, was the sheer ferocity of humanity's will to survive. The humans didn't just fight back, they struck with precision, intelligence, and a cunning that their alien enemies had underestimated. The most chilling part of these records was the human dominion's final act: the creation of a weapon so powerful that it could wipe entire fleets off the face of the galaxy. The weapon was never used, not because it couldn't be, but because humanity had learned the true cost of such power. They had locked it away, buried it deep in the planet's core, and sworn never to use it unless absolutely necessary. But the fact that such a weapon existed, that humanity had the potential to annihilate entire star systems, sent shivers down the spines of the Arcturians. As this knowledge spread through the ranks of the galaxy's most powerful races, fear began to grow. What if the humans had more of these weapons hidden? What if they were just waiting for the right moment to unleash them? The idea that humanity was holding back its true potential, that they had the ability to reshape the galaxy, but chose not to, was far more terrifying than any invasion or war. Meanwhile, on Earth, the humans remained blissfully unaware of the fear they had instilled in the galaxy. They continued their lives, exploring space, advancing their technology, and interacting with their own kind. But beneath the surface, a sense of unease was beginning to grow. The humans could feel it, the presence of something watching them. Something vast and powerful, but still hidden from view. It wasn't just the Andorians or the Tyleracs or the Arcturians that were starting to pay attention. The entire galaxy had begun to notice the humans, and it was only a matter of time before they would come to Earth, looking for answers. As the galaxy's leaders convened once more, They knew they had to act. The humans were no longer just a curiosity, they were a threat, and the galaxy had no idea how to stop them. What would happen when the humans fully unleashed their hidden power? What would the galaxy do when it realized that humanity had kept its darkest secrets concealed for so long? The answer was uncertain, but one thing was clear: the galaxy had never faced anything like humans before. And they were about to find out that when a species that has been underestimated for so long finally reveals its true power, no one is ready for what comes next. This part delves deeper into the hidden history and potential of humanity, focusing on their adaptability and the dark secrets they've kept from the galaxy. The tension continues to build as the rest of the galaxy begins to realize just how dangerous humans can be. Let me know if you need further revisions. The galactic fear escalates. The galaxy had always known power in terms of fleets, weapons, and technologies that could raze entire civilizations to the ground. But in the wake of humanity's startling actions and hidden strengths, the galaxy's definition of power was rapidly changing. The Tylorax had learned the hard way that the humans were not a species to be underestimated, but they were not alone in their fear. Across the stars, every race began to question everything they had once believed to be true. It wasn't just that humanity had defeated the Tylorax, it was the way they had done it, a complete reversal of the typical battle. The Tylorax were warriors of immense strength, but the humans had won through persistence, adaptability, and an unyielding resolve that none had expected. News of the humans' unexpected victory spread fast, and the galaxy's most powerful races quickly convened, each of them struggling to understand the new reality. The Arcturians had always seen themselves as the keepers of knowledge, but even their vast archives had failed to reveal the truth about humanity's hidden strength. Now they were left grappling with the realization that they had been blind to the growing threat for far too long. The question that weighed heavily on every mind was no longer if humanity would be a danger. It was when. In the capital of the Jorlin Empire, a race renowned for their technological advancements and brutal efficiency, the High Council was in session. Leaders from across the galaxy's greatest powers had gathered to discuss what needed to be done. It was clear that humanity was not going to be easily controlled, and no one in the room could come up with a strategy to defeat them. For the first time in centuries, the Jorlin, with all their weapons and intelligence, were unsure of how to proceed. General Zara, the head of the Jorlin military, addressed the council with a grim expression. We must face the truth. The humans have crossed the line from being insignificant to being dangerous. They are not like the other species we have conquered. They are unpredictable, resilient, and adaptable to any situation. Their victories over the Tylorax were not a fluke. It was proof that they can overcome even the greatest challenges. A murmur of agreement spread through the room. The Tylorax had not only been defeated, they had been humiliated. The Tylorax were the galaxy's most feared warriors, and they had fled from the humans. The thought that a race as formidable as the Tylorax could be forced to retreat had shaken the galaxy to its core. We must act now before it's too late, said Corin, the Arcturian scholar who had long believed that knowledge could conquer any threat. His voice was steady, but his eyes revealed a deep sense of unease. If we don't contain the humans now, they will rise to a position where no one can challenge them. They are unlike any species we've encountered, and their potential, if they fully awaken, could spell the end for every other race in this galaxy. The Jorlin leaders exchanged uneasy glances. None of them had expected such an outcome. Humanity, a species that had been thought of as primitive and insignificant, had now proven that it was a force to be reckoned with. No longer were they simply an outlier in the galaxy's grand design. They were a serious threat, and every race knew it. For the first time, the Galactic Council was united in fear. The Arcturians, the Tylorax, the Jorlin, the Shalovians, all of them had underestimated humanity. Now they were faced with the terrifying possibility that their combined might not be enough to hold back this rising power. Humanity's adaptability, their relentless drive to survive, and their terrifying will to fight had left every powerful race questioning their own place in the universe. It wasn't just military might that made humanity dangerous. It was their ability to learn from every encounter, their knack for using seemingly weak points as strengths. The Tylorax had underestimated this in their recent battle, and now the galaxy's leaders were doing the same. Humanity had a strange, almost unnatural ability to evolve with every confrontation. Their power didn't lie in their technology, it lay in their minds and their unwavering ability to survive. They had always known how to turn adversity into strength, and this had made them unpredictable. Something that had always been a dangerous trait in any species. Across the galaxy, fear grew. The Arcturians began to speak in hushed tones about the possibility of humanity joining forces with the Jorlin, forming an alliance that would upset the balance of power across the stars. Others whispered about the humans' ability to unite disparate forces, to bring even the most unlikely allies together in a common cause. "We need to find a way to control them," General Zara said, her voice sharp and commanding. "We cannot afford to let them continue growing unchecked. They may be hiding something far worse than we've seen. And if they do, we won't stand a chance." But there were no easy answers. The galaxy's greatest minds had been stumped by a species they had once dismissed as insignificant. And now, they faced the grim reality. Humanity was not just another species in the galaxy. They were the one force that could change everything. As the Council continued its debates, the realization sank in. Humanity had evolved in ways no one could predict, and they were now a force that could shift the very balance of power in the galaxy. And no one, not the Tylorax, not the Jorlin, and not even the Arcturians, knew how to stop them. The fear of humans had only just begun. This part focuses on the growing tension and fear throughout the galaxy as more species begin to realize the extent of humanity's strength. It shifts the focus to the political and military responses of the galaxy's leaders, highlighting their panic and uncertainty in the face of a force they cannot control. Let me know if you need further adjustments or additions. The human advantage across the galaxy, an unsettling truth was beginning to settle in every corner of the known universe. Humanity was no longer just a species that could be dismissed or ignored. They had proven themselves to be a force capable of shattering the very foundations of the galaxy's established order. The galaxy's greatest powers had once been accustomed to seeing themselves as the unchallenged masters of the stars, yet now they faced a species that was both unpredictable and unstoppable, a species that could turn even the direst of situations into victory. Every race, from the mighty Tylorax to the ancient Arcturians, were now forced to come to grips with the terrifying reality. Humanity had an advantage that no one could match, and it was a strength they had never seen before. The most shocking realization came when the Shalovians, a race known for their psychic abilities, attempted to infiltrate the human mind. For centuries, the Shalovians had used their telepathic powers to manipulate and control weaker species, bending them to their will. But when they tried to breach the thoughts of a human, they found themselves unable to penetrate the layers of the human mind. Their psychic abilities, honed through millennia of practice, were rendered useless by the resilience of the human consciousness. It was a paradox that the Shalovians could not understand. They had never encountered a mind so resistant to control. News of the Shalovian failure spread quickly, and it wasn't long before the galaxy's most powerful races began to reconsider the nature of humanity's strength. The humans were not just physically capable, they were mentally unbreakable. Unlike any species before them, humans had the ability to face fear, adversity, and even despair head-on, never yielding to forces that sought to control them. The galaxy had always relied on the concept of dominance, but humanity had proved that sheer will could be just as powerful as any weapon or army on Earth itself. The The humans had become aware of the growing fear they inspired. The unexpected defeat of the Tylorax had not been just a military victory, it had been a statement. And it was a statement that echoed throughout the galaxy. Humanity was no longer content with being passive observers of the universe. They had been pushed into action, and now they were pushing back. The humans began to understand the power they held. They were not just surviving anymore, they were thriving. Every battle, every conflict had only made them stronger. Each victory, no matter how small, had brought them closer to an understanding of their true potential. At the heart of this realization was the human ability to adapt. While the Tylorax relied on their brute force, the Jorlin on their advanced technology, and the Arcturians on their wisdom, humanity had something far more dangerous. They could learn and evolve at a pace that no other species could match. Their ability to rapidly adapt to new challenges, both physical and mental, made them nearly impossible to defeat. It wasn't just about being strong, it was about being flexible, about changing when the situation demanded it, and always finding a way to win. The humans had unlocked a secret that none of the galaxy's greatest races had even considered. It wasn't just about technology or firepower. It wasn't about having the largest fleet or the most powerful weapons. It was about a mindset that allowed them to take on any challenge, face any adversary, and emerge victorious. Not through the strength of their weapons, but through the power of their determination and adaptability. This mindset was the ultimate weapon, one that no other species could replicate. As the galaxy's leaders gathered in yet another high-stakes meeting, the fear of humanity was palpable. They were no longer discussing hypothetical threats. They were discussing a very real, very present danger. The humans were not a species they could simply wipe out with a fleet or outsmart with technology. Humanity had shown that they could endure, adapt, and emerge stronger with each challenge they faced. There was no quick solution, no easy way to neutralize them. The realization had set in. The galaxy could not continue to operate under the assumption that it held all the power. The humans had shattered that illusion. At the same time, something else was happening, something that no one had expected. The humans, recognizing the fear they had inspired, began to change the narrative. They had always been a race that valued survival, but now they had begun to realize the importance of unity. They were no longer content to live in the shadows, quietly enduring the galaxy's complexities. The humans began to forge alliances, not out of necessity, but out of strength. They reached out to the weaker species, those who had been oppressed or ignored by the greater powers. And these species, seeing the strength and resilience of humanity, began to rally around them. This newfound unity among the humans and their allies created a ripple effect throughout the galaxy. It was a signal to every other species that humanity was not just a lone, isolated force. They were becoming a movement, one that could change the very fabric of galactic politics. The greatest races had always relied on their strength, their ability to dominate the stars. But humanity had shown them that true power lay not in oppression, but in unity, adaptability, and the ability to outlast any obstacle. The galaxy was changing. The rise of humanity had not just shifted the balance of power, it had shattered it. And the greatest fear of all was that humanity's rise was just the beginning. No one knew where they would go next or what they would become. But one thing was certain: the humans had found their advantage, and nothing would ever be the same again. This part builds on humanity's growing strength, focusing on their ability to adapt and unite, creating a movement that begins to challenge the established galactic order. It keeps the tension high while showing the true power of humanity's resilience. Let me know if you need further changes. The terrifying truth about humans: the galaxy had underestimated humans for too long. They had dismissed them as weak, primitive creatures that could be easily controlled, their quiet existence nothing more than a distant curiosity. But as the days passed, as more stories of human triumph spread, It became clear that humanity was no longer the fragile species that the galaxy had thought them to be. They had evolved, adapted, and learned how to harness their greatest strength, their will to survive. It was no longer a question of whether humans could conquer the galaxy, but rather what the galaxy could do to stop them. Across the stars, the fear of humanity was escalating. The great powers of the galaxy, who had once ruled with arrogance and might, now found themselves on edge. The Tylarax, the Jorlin, the Arcturians, all of them were starting to realize that they had made a grave mistake in underestimating the human species. Every day brought new reports of humanity's growing influence. More and more alien species, once oppressed or ignored, were beginning to rally behind the humans, forming alliances that only strengthened their cause. The Council of the Galaxies. Most powerful races convened once more, but this time, the atmosphere was different. There was no grand display of confidence. No assurances that they would find a way to crush humanity and return to their rightful place at the top of the galactic hierarchy. Instead, there was a deep sense of unease, a feeling that something had shifted, and no one knew how to undo it. Corin, the wise Arcturian scholar, stood before the council, his expression grim. We cannot ignore the facts any longer. Humanity is not just a rising power, they are a force that is reshaping the galaxy. They have a strength that we cannot comprehend, a will that cannot be broken. And now they have an army that is unified and unstoppable. The council listened in silence, the weight of Corin's words settling over them. For the first time, the galaxy's greatest minds understood the truth. Humanity was not just a species to be feared, they were a species to be reckoned with. Their power lay not in their technology, nor in their sheer numbers, but in something far more dangerous. Their ability to adapt, to learn, to evolve under pressure, was a strength that none of the galaxy's powers could match. They were unpredictable, and that was their greatest weapon. The leaders of the galaxy's empires had always believed that power came from control, that the ability to conquer and dominate was the mark of true strength. But humanity had shown them that power could come from something entirely different. It wasn't about control, it was about survival. It was about standing firm in the face of overwhelming odds, never backing down, and always finding a way to push forward. Humanity had learned to thrive in the most hostile environments, to face destruction and rise again, stronger than before. And now, that strength was turning the galaxy upside down. In the heart of the galaxy, on a neutral world where representatives of the various species gathered, the air was thick with tension. There was no longer any debate over whether humanity was a threat. The question was no longer if they could be stopped. It was whether anyone had the power to stop them at all. The fear was no longer just a whisper, it was a full-blown panic. Humanity had made its presence known, and with it came the possibility of something that no one had ever considered. What if humanity could unite the galaxy? What if they could rally the weaker species, those who had always been oppressed or cast aside by the powerful races? What if the humans, with their endless adaptability, had the power to bring an end to the old order and create a new one? The thought sent a chill through the council. The galaxy's greatest empires, built over centuries, were built on the premise that some species were stronger than others, that the powerful could control the weak. But humanity had shown them that the balance of power could shift in the blink of an eye, and those who had once been weak could now be the ones to decide the fate of the galaxy. On Earth, the humans were beginning to understand the full scope of their power. They had no intention of ruling over the galaxy, no desire to conquer the stars. But they did want something. They wanted respect. They wanted their place in the universe to be recognized. They wanted to show that they were no longer the fragile, insignificant species that had once been overlooked. They had proven that they could survive the impossible, that they could rise from the ashes of their darkest hours. And now they were ready to take their place among the stars, not as conquerors, but as equals. As humanity's influence grew, The other species began to see them not as a threat to be eliminated, but as a new kind of power, one that was unlike anything the galaxy had ever known. The humans were unpredictable, but they were also reliable in their own way. They had proven that they would fight for their survival, that they would never give up, no matter how daunting the challenge. And in this new galaxy, where power was no longer defined by fleets or armies, that kind of resilience was the greatest strength of all. The galaxy had learned a hard lesson. It had learned that humans were not to be feared because of their weapons or their ships, but because of their spirit. The spirit of survival, of unity, of an unbreakable will to stand against anything that threatened them. And as humanity's influence spread across the stars, the galaxy would soon come to realize that the humans were not just surviving. They were becoming the new force that would define the future of the universe. The galaxy had been shaken to its core, and there was no going back. Humanity had risen, and the galaxy would never be the same again.